What's up, my people? Welcome to Fellowship Bible Church's Sermon Spotlight, where we're coming at you each and every week with a fresh weekend of debrief and effort to send biblical truth. What better way to do that than by the power of conversation? I'm one of your hosts for today, Caleb Pearson. Joining me in the host spotlight, Miss Abby Lindenberg. Abby, how are you?
Good.
Good. Happy summer.
Thanks
for being here. He's back with us, the man, the myth, Mark Carey. Mark, how you doing, buddy?
Good.
Good. Happy summer, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for being in the
That's a hot one.
pulpit this weekend. Very hot. It's going to be like 90-something and then 94 tomorrow or something
I think
crazy.
that's that now.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. And we got a whole Disciple Makers Multiplied youth camp happening all week here at church, so that's a ton of fun as well. But not only are we teaching them James, we're trying to keep them hydrated, so continued prayers for that will be great. But it's shaping up to be a good week. Guys, what I'd love to do is jump right into a Sunday in review, Daniel chapter 10. Good chunk this week, Mark. A lot of content in that chapter to get through. But Abby, I'll come your way first about what stood out, and I know you and I had a couple thoughts, and Mark, we'll just kind of go from there. So
Yeah.
thoughts on the weekend.
So one of the things that I noticed or wanted to ask you about was you mentioned that the angel touched Daniel 3 different times. And that happened in chapter 8 too, but only once. So I just didn't know, is there any significance there?
There probably is,
Yeah.
but who knows what?
Right.
It's just an observation. It was like, and as I was studying it, I said, look, isn't that interesting? There was always a response to the touching.
Yeah.
A hand touched me, and it set me trembling. Because he sees his vision, all of a sudden you get a tap on the shoulder. It's like, woo. So that's one of the touches. He's touched, and then there's the touching of the lips, the touching of this being strengthened. I don't know all the depth of that. It's just that something's very kinetic is, I guess, the word here, and that. I don't know, for reassurance, there was just this sense of Daniel was very upset, very concerned, and
Well, and he's older at this point too, right?
and
So
there
it's
might have something to do with it too. And you can make a great song out of it.
Yeah.
He Touched Me, that's an old song, a Gaither song back in the 60s or 70s, but anyway. So I'm not sure. It's got to have something of value.
Simply because it's in there.
It's in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
The first touch, in one sense, the response after the first touch, he says, "O Daniel, man of highest, understand the words I'm about to, and stand upright." And when he had spoken this to me, I stood up. So Daniel's first response to the first touching is he stood. To the second touch, he spoke. To the third touch, it says he was strengthened. So there's your sermon outline.
Yep.
He stood, he spoke, and he was strengthened, all from the touch of God. There's something that there was a direct response to that touch and what how it impacted Daniel.
It's good.
Yeah.
So because that's just one element of the whole chapter, right?
Yeah.
You got to cover more. You got to get the whole vision, the whole visit down packed. So yeah, that's good. It's fascinating to me to see it. The more of these visions we get through, I like finding the recurring themes of it all. Because Daniel's a hard book, right? It's hard to picture, hard to understand, certainly hard to apply. But we get to this point, and I've been pleasantly surprised with my own ability to kind of understand these visions as we go through them. Because okay, we're on to the fourth one, and we've been through this before. Certainly Daniel has, and so I can see that happening in his life, almost like a movie, where by the end of this thing, he's like, okay, I'm getting another vision. So based on what I got out of the first couple, I have this familiarity with it, and that's what I appreciate about your outline to the sermon, focusing on there's a comfort from the interpreter as well. And so it's not just this, we're going to overwhelm you with knowledge, we're going to scare you and confuse you, but there's relationship.
There's relationship
happening.
You're highly esteemed. You're a priceless treasure, Daniel, and God acknowledges that. He cares for Daniel. He's just not some mouthpiece, a spokesman that I need. Who can I? Oh, yeah, that guy will do work. you know, but there's some,
and people that think that's how God works.
Yeah.
Still,
Yeah.
that's their view of God. Oh, he's got his mindless robots. He's just using it.
Yeah.
Like, man, he loves us.
Yeah.
He's using
Yeah.
us. So
Yeah.
that's cool. In your study for this, your preparation for it, was it a lot to bite off? Is it how do I get the whole chapter done? Do I?
Yeah, well, and it's layers of content that you just can't do it all justice, and it sometimes raises more questions than answers, especially when you're dealing with that unseen realm, that parallel universe of the, and it's descriptive again, not prescriptive. So it describes something that happened, this conversation with this angelic, who said, I was detained for 3 weeks. I was dispatched while you began praying, but it took me 3 weeks because the Prince of Persia. So those are just all, it's not that they're offhanded comments. It's just that we are allowed into this conversation that Daniel had with this person. But that's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
So what else does the scripture have to say? So you could, whole seminary classes are on angelology or demonology or Satanology, you know, that you could spend a whole semester talking about. So
Yeah. Would Daniel have had any more context? Like, are those few references going to be as confusing to him as to us? Or would he kind of be like, oh, yeah, that other realm, I'm there?
yeah, I have to believe that even people in Daniel's age, at time period, would have had more understanding of the Old Testament teaching and view the world cosmology and all that stuff, because they would have been far more steeped in it than what we are today. We gotta go back, if we even spend a lot of time in the Old Testament. I had one person I talked to after the service Sunday made the comment how much they're enjoying Daniel because the church they grew up in, they never studied the Old Testament. It was more of the main line, and it was they maybe had an Old Testament reading, but it was a gospel account or it was whatever, but never going through a book of an Old Testament kind of verse by verse. Daniel would have had a great, I think, a much better context because of the book of the law. We know that from day one as a young man, and probably if he was raised in the royal court, as it's believed, and maybe he knew Jeremiah. I mean, there's a lot of ifs. He would have been
and I think that's a benefit of the study of Daniel, because the flip side of that coin is he's also getting visions and some insider information on stuff he's got no clue about.
Right.
The valley between the peaks, some of the saints comes up in Daniel, and some of these other references where he could have an idea of what that is. But now where we are, we look back in a way that he couldn't.
Right.
But he was looking back when he was.
Yeah.
So there's always the both and.
How much did Daniel connect the dots based on what he knew of what had already been communicated from the Psalms or from some of the prophets, and certainly the Torah? But yeah, we have that better advantage because do we take advantage of it? Do we really understand some of the stuff that Jesus added, certainly, or Paul added? And when it comes to the area of that unseen realm or angels or demons and satanic influences today, at least in the American culture or the Western culture, we just kind of ignore it. And yet we shouldn't, because it is, there is a lot in it.
And that's what's fascinating about other countries and other cultures who actually heighten spirituality, but unbiblically.
Yeah.
So
I can remember
it's a ditch on the other side.
Yeah. Well, I can remember one of my first trips to Africa years ago with Tim McManigal, and we were driving through this one village in western Kenya, and there is this lady alongside the road, and she's
going at it.
Wacko, and she's crazy, and she's half naked, and she's just going at it. And we drove by, and our driver, we kind of said, what's going on there? And he didn't give it a thought. Oh, that's one of the demon-possessed people, and drives on.
Right.
Because it was
typical. Yep.
Well, that's one of the demon-possessed people. And so, yeah, that's one reason why I started off the sermon with the Screw Tape Letters. Keep them in ignorance. Don't let them know. And if they get suspicious, just put somebody in red tights before them.
Yeah.
And they'll.
Yeah. Well, question for you, Abby, not to put you on the spot too much, but spiritual warfare, is that something, when did you grow in your faith and realize that's a thing? Because I look back at my testimony, my story, I knew it existed, but I remember pretty much accidentally believing it's uncomfortable and scary, so I'm not going to learn about it.
Yeah.
But that's not a good enough excuse.
Right. Yeah, I would say it's definitely later in my walk that I realized that was a thing. Maybe even the last 5 to 7
couple years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's got to be because we're adults, you have to get aware there's clearly more going on here than me. See, I don't expect our youth right now going through the book of James this week. There's going to be some spiritual reality coming up in that book about demons and all this other stuff. And so it's like, to what degree are you aware? And then how can you still cling to a hope about it? I loved what you said this weekend. Enough about Satan to try to just let's end on Jesus, please, so that okay, now here's what we do about it. But that's something I've realized in my own walk. Just because it's uncomfortable, that's not a good enough reason to avoid discussing it. And that's something I lived by for years. In my college walk, it was like, okay, let's stick to the easy stuff, the stuff that gets traction with people, the stuff that gets their attention, their emotions, that makes them feel good. It's so easy to study that. But what about everything else God has given us?
Yeah.
It's a lens.
Right. And the other danger is then, so you get a little bit interested, you then might gravitate towards, or you Google or something, and now there's a ditch on the other side where there's a demon behind every bush, and so everything has a demonic connection to it, and
man's responsibility,
and that's not good.
Right.
I think as an example in this Daniel 10 passage, there is this prince of Persia that talks about this prince of Greece that's coming. Demons that the implication are attached to a nation, a people group. Now there is a belief that there are what's called territorial demons. That's, if you read books on demonology and things like that, some believe that there is a particular, say, a region that will, or a territory that is demonic. And I'm not. I don't think you can base that on Daniel 10,
right? Because
it wasn't like that. The territory, the land of Persia had a demonic. It was the people, the nation, the entity was attached to that. We don't know that when there seemed to be a separate, Greece comes and takes over that territory, but it was like there's a different prince of Greece. So it wasn't the same demonic activity that just got transferred over to the same territory that got, that type of thing. And there are scholars who, systematic theologians and scholars who will take all the different passages and references to that unseen realm and try to make sense out of it. And there's helpful material out there that we probably need to be much more aware of. I'm curious if Daniel, of course he was elderly at that time, how much longer he lived, but it was like, I wonder what he thought after hearing all that and thinking, I wonder how it changed his prayer life, everything related, and had he known this before? And was this all new to him, that there is these demonic attachments to people, to groups? I think he was aware, because, like I said, I think you go back to Deuteronomy 32, and I just briefly talked about that in Deuteronomy 32, where Moses, the Lord through Moses, is saying, talk to your fathers. They'll tell you about Genesis 11, I think is what he's referring to, when God divided up the nations and gave them the inheritance, but mine is going to be Jacob. So it was like, this is known. It's in the Old Testament. It's in the Torah. It's there, and there's this assumption that this idea of an unseen realm was not new. It was understood. How it was working out. Well, we got a little bit of a picture here in chapter 10 that there was a prince of Persia, and there was a prince of Greece, and they were fighting against your prince, the prince of Israel, which was Michael the archangel. So but it's piecemeal. And again, I think there's a whole lot of study. It'd be a great BTC class probably to do just on that unseen realm.
Well, and even the way we've handled the appearance of Christ in Daniel, and what is it him that's pre-incarnate and appearing, or is it somebody else? I remember wrestling with Daniel 3 where, some scholars will say the fourth in the fire wasn't Christ. Some will say it was, and similar in this chapter, some will say it was all Gabriel and he was the one that appeared, and then he walked over and touched, and
and that is that's a great Bible study question,
right?
Because probably half of my commentaries that I looked at said that the what was described in verse 5-6 was some angelic messenger that continued on in verse 10, who touched Daniel, that it was all the same person.
Right.
So the question is, so what led me to take it that it was two separate? First of all, the description.
Right.
In 5 and 6.
And you brought that out this weekend.
Yeah. I the comparison with the book of Revelation, it just, there's too close of a comparison with the Alpha and Omega Revelation. It's just too close. So why could that be the same person then that touched him and continued? Well, because it goes in that next few verses, it is that very person who touched Daniel's and said in verse 11, "O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words I'm about to tell you."
I've been sent.
I have been sent, number one. And number two, he's withstanding me for 21 days, the Prince of Persia. So some demonic force was blocking him. Well, I don't think that'd be Jesus.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we would say, obviously, that can't be Jesus. But there's no clearly defined demarcation of that image of the gold of Uphaz and the flaming fires of torch-like eyes and all that stuff. There's no clear line of change that says that who continues there and was withstood by Prince of Persia was not the same person. So commentators will look at that and says, well, it doesn't say now that Gabriel stepped in. Now there are some literary things like verse 10 where it says, "Then behold, a hand touched me, and he said to me," verse 11. Well, I can understand where the "he," you can refer back to verse 5 and 6.
Right. But it seems like a pivot.
Yeah. Mine says, "and the one who looks like a man," which is also how they describe Gabriel in chapter 8.
That's right.
The one who looks like a man said to me.
Yeah. But verse 5, verse 5 says, are you reading verse 5?
No, I was in 10.
Right, 10. So verse 5 says, "I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man." A certain man.
Certain man
but
versus
it's different. The connections, to me, really connects it to Gabriel.
Yeah.
Right.
And because he's the messenger. You got the tie-in back to chapter 9, chapter 8. You've got Gabriel in those passages where he's clearly identified as Gabriel isn't described in this brilliant way. Something's different about this first vision. And then the question is raised, well, why? And this is, I didn't bring out. It should have been brought out, I think, at the end. So why, if that's true, if we take that this is the pre-incarnate Christ being, why did God deem it necessary that he show up now and in this brilliant way, in such a way that it was very unnerving? No strength was left in me. My natural color turned to deathly pallor, and I retained no strength. There was no comeliness, as in King James, no comeliness in me, and whatever it was. But he fainted dead and away. Well, okay, God, why don't you just do what you other times? Just let Gabriel handle it.
Right.
But why this shocking presentation of yourself and your glory in that? It ties back, I think, to the whole theme of Daniel, which is God is sovereign. He is supreme over all of the affairs. There was something that was blocking the response to Daniel. Because in chapter 9, it was, while I'm still speaking, Gabriel shows up. He, for 3 weeks, it was not that Gabriel or Daniel was owed an explanation.
Right.
but he got one. I was being withstood by the prince of Persia. There's something going on here. If let's say that's all you had, he's praying, he's fasting, and then we start with verse 10. Then he got touched, and Gabriel shows up, and I was detained by blah. Would that not make Daniel a little bit unnerved even more? You mean like you battled to a draw? I thought, what's going on here? I thought we're the good guys. We're going to win. Or, now you got to go back and fight more against the prince of Greece, and you have to ask Michael to come and help you? Given the conflict and the spiritual war thing, I know why God showed up in the pre-incarnate Christ. He wanted Daniel to know,
I'm on it.
I'm on it. I've got this covered. I am, as he told John centuries later, the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And so I do think that puts all the more emphasis on that this was the pre-incarnate Christ that showed up. And we need that today. We need, in the days of Jesus, when that glory was veiled, as the writer of Hebrews in chapter 7 and Jonathan Wesley wrote in Hark the Herald Angels Sing, veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. This image in chapter 10, there was no veiling. It was like, it was magnificent, glorious splendor. And it just conveys again the emphasis in this book of Daniel. God is sovereign. He is in charge. He is the glorious one. And there's reasons for all this, but he wins. And we'll see in chapter 11 and 12 that the conflict continues. But rest assured, God wins because he alone is the sovereign Lord. And there is a writing of truth, verse 21. I'll tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. And there's no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Daniel, your prince. But God has a plan. There's truthful writing that is being conveyed. God's plan of the ages, this prophetic utterances that are being shared. It's going to come to its full conclusion, and God wins.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's a good spot to end us, I think.
So it was just an introduction. Chapter 10 is just an introduction. The vision is going to be shared in 11 and 12.
It's going to be weighty.
Yeah. But this is where it ended up. And I think we're meant to be encouraged by it, which is kind of why I wanted to end what I did in that message.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciated Don's note too, in one of the evenings that he taught, where he said, who are we to decide what God wants us to know and not know? Like, why do we get to say, I don't need to know that? Well, God wrote it down, so he wants us to know it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that throughout this.
And let's not jump too quickly to say the secret things belong to God.
Right.
They don't. Well, if he wrote it down, let's at least study enough to ferret out as much as we can to see. And then if we reach a dead end, a brick wall, let's just accept that's as far as God is willing to let us go. But let's not get there too soon and just be lazy in a way of saying, prophecy doesn't matter. It'll work out in the end, or these things.
It's good.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you, man.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Abby, thank you for being here. I do want to point people to our website and let you know that Vacation Bible School will be happening next week here at FBC. That registration's live. In fact, if you go to our website, fbcva.org, it'll scroll down. It'll be right there in front of your face. You can register kids K through 6th. We're looking forward to that week for sure. For all our listeners and viewers, remember that we love to hear from you. You can find us at fbcva.org/podcast. The fact of the matter, everybody, is that sermons are not meant to take an hour, but rather transform a lifetime. Until next week, much love. God bless.